thanks for joining me today. Really appreciate you taking the time to talk about the program. So I think, what we're going to do, I just have some questions that I prepared, and there's just going to be an opportunity to talk a little bit about the program at Miami and just share some information with folks who might be interested, prospective students, anyone who's checking out the page.
I appreciate you inviting me.
Of course. So first, maybe if you could just comment a little bit on how the program got started and maybe, some of the history of the program at Miami, that'd be great.
Yeah, and I think actually that's a good introduction to a theme and what I want to talk about with you here. That I think there are certain ways that esports are like traditional sports, and then there are very, very unique ways that esports are not like traditional sports. And the history of our program, I think, speaks to that notness. The club scene around esports, as I'm sure you well know, is incredibly robust. It's hard to find a college on campus, college anywhere, that doesn't have multiple esports clubs around different games and sort of extensive organizations that have kind of risen from the grassroots. But the institutions themselves have historically not done a whole lot with it. And so the history of our program is back in 2016. One of our students came into my office, who was one of my advisees, and she pitched this idea. She said, "Look, I'm president of our club. We have 600 members, right? This is a thing. And then here's the Smash Club, and here's the Pokemon Club, and here are all these different clubs. And I believe that the future of esports is varsity esports. Robert Morris was the first school to do it. I know Kurt, who at that time I didn't know Kurt. Like, she told me she knew Kurt, and she got Kurt and I on a phone call, and we talked for a couple hours, and not long after that, we declared the first Division I varsity esports program in the country, right? And now there are hundreds of these types of programs. And I don't mean to say that in some sort of braggadocious way, like we were the first, but I think the most notable thing of that was that this was student driven, right? This was not about, the institution. This wasn't about Nike. This wasn't about some kind of like massive juggernaut of sports marketing. But esports is a grassroots movement. It is the space that students live in. And for us, that manifested itself with Stelany, who is an incredible person, coming to my office as a student, pitching this idea, helping me build it, along with a group of faculty and coaches and folks that we engaged in this. She went on to go work at Blizzard after she left here, and she's now at 343. But it was a grassroots piece. And I just think that's so critical, because I think the most successful programs in the space will ultimately need to be driven by that grassroots, right? If a president of a university just says, "I'm going to wave my hands and we're going to have an esports program," that's doomed for failure. Like that this is about a sport for the people. That's what's so impressive about it.
Yeah, so that makes a lot of sense. It seems like the program has a deep level of student support and is built around, a student-focused outcome. But then also, I imagine that because it's been around for so long, you probably have kind of a deeper resource commitment than a lot of programs do.
We do. I don't know if length of time dictates that, right? There are definitely programs that are relatively new, but the institutions have invested in them heavily. We're at this really infant stage of this sport as a collegiate sport, and so it's growing in very uneven ways. There aren't real standards that are being applied across all of the institutions. Like, all of this is still very, the phrase that gets used a lot in sort of the circles that I'm in is, this is very Wild West, right? Like, everyone's trying to figure out their own thing. Everyone's trying to do their own thing. And so I think the most common path towards a varsity team, or let's just say even a sanctioned team by the institution, is very bootstrapped. relative to the budgets of varsity football or varsity hockey or varsity soccer, esports, even at the most resourced institutions, are getting sort of a fraction of the share that they had. I mean, we had one game we played, and granted, it was the national championship game, but nonetheless, one game that we played where we had more people from our university watching our students play than went to every single football game for the entire season combined.
Wow.
Right? So institutions are trying to figure out how to match the eyeballs with the budget, right? How to create the resources to appropriately support these when we're really carving out new territory. The pie is kind of fixed.
Right.
Universities have a budget. And so trying to find a space in that pie for esports remains a challenge for institutions of all sorts of sizes.
That's great. So maybe that's a good segue into talking a little bit about the competitive side of the program. Maybe just talk a little bit about, how many teams you guys have, what games do you play, what kind of leagues do you participate in? Cover that a little bit.
Right. Yeah. Again, part of the Wild West here. One of the ways that esports, I think, is very different than traditional sports is in not just the variety of games that are played, but the dynamic nature of that, right? Soccer is soccer and will always be soccer and does not change from year to year. But, a tier one esport, 3 years ago, Fortnite, was a blip on people's radar.
Sure.
And 3 years from now, who knows what those sports will be? So the idea of even having a team is a very fluid concept in collegiate esports, because games will rise and games will fall. And as you were well aware, I mean, most great players at the collegiate and professional level are probably good at one game. Right. It's not like when game Y rises after game X, those players are going to be able to play game Y. So the best way to construct a team is to have some fluidity to it. The way we've done that is we have a varsity and a JV team. And the JV team, where Miami University, our team is the Red Hawks. That's who we are. That's kind of our mascot. And so we have our varsity Red Hawk team and our JV team, which we call the hatchery, right? Like, this is where we're hatching out the next Red Hawks. And so at the varsity level, we compete in League, we compete in Hearthstone, CSGO, Overwatch, and oh my god, I'm forgetting. I hope you can edit this until I remember what the fifth game is. Oh, Rocket League. Thank you. And I guess the reason I didn't remember Rocket League right away is because that was a hatchery game. A year or two ago, Rocket League wasn't a varsity sport, but now Rocket League has elevated, I think, largely because it's the most family-friendly of the esports. There's no blood, blue blood or red blood. It's a very safe kind of game to play. But at our hatchery level, we're playing Fortnite, Valorant. We're playing, sort of experimental and mobile games. We're trying to at least bubble under so that when the next great game rises, we're ready to go, whether it's Apex, right, or not. That's kind of what we do. So we've got 5 teams at the varsity level. At the JV level, it's a lot more fluid. We have anywhere between, let's say, 4 and 8 teams. As far as competitive leagues go, this is back to my point about it being a Wild West. Like, we'll compete wherever we can compete. Sure. Like, that right now, there is no dominant league that's organizing all of this. The publishers have their leagues of sorts, and then there's all sorts of startups that have entered the space. And, as long as we don't have to make a non-compete agreement in the league that we play in, we'll play in as many as we want. Now, I think it's worth mentioning that the athletic conference that our university competes in, which is the Mid-American Conference, just recently launched an esports league to support that conference. And so we're trying to do what we can to help advance that, just because we've got a kind of a broader institutional commitment. but our president, the president of our university, is the chairman of the esports league for that Mid-American Conference, right? So we're trying to invest our institutional expertise as best as we can.
Yeah,
But in short, we'll compete in any league we can play in.
great. So, in your facility, in the arena, what kind of gear are you offering to, and maybe, speaking on those two levels, are there particular machines that varsity teams use versus in the hatchery? Talk about that a little bit.
Yeah, we don't distinguish between the machines that they use.
Mm-hmm.
The distinguishing is in the priority for reserving those machines,
Hmm.
because that's really more the issue. Is there, if we have 5 teams of varsity, let's say we have 5 at JV, got 10 teams of anywhere between 1 and 2 to 6 people. It's kind of hard to reserve the space. So at the moment, we have a reserved arena for our varsity and JV players. That's basically got the highest end Alienware gaming rigs that we can get. It's outfitted with gaming chairs, and students, as most sort of high end esports players, they have their own peripherals they bring in that they prefer to play with. But the CPUs are pretty much the best we can buy. I mean, that's our approach to it.
Nice.
That these are not typical for the university. We have gigabit plus access to the internet, directly wired in. We bypass the firewalls and other things that are going to potentially slow the gameplay. Now, we have historically had one arena. We are building 2 more arenas this summer,
Wow.
as well as a new casting space, which is basically a broadcast studio that's going to live between these arenas. And those are going to be in our student center and are going to have more high end. We'll have a traditional arena. One of them will be a traditional arena. The second of the 2 arenas is going to be a competitive arena. If you can imagine, when you think about, your Dota finals, right? Like any of these kind of traditional esports finals where you've got the teams on the stage and, with a sort of single desk with the LEDs in front of it, that type of thing. And so that's all being built this summer, as well as some console gaming esports spaces. I mean, Miami, we're investing big in it. We're putting millions in because
Wow.
we recognize the role this is going to play in the future of collegiate sports.
Yeah. Well, that's amazing. I'm excited to maybe come see those facilities once they're created. That's really cool.
Would love for you to come.
Yeah. So yeah, what's on that note of, making a big investment and kind of going all in on esports. I'd love to know what is something that seems unique to you about your program, something that makes it really special, um, in and above, that material investment.
That's a great question. I think that the 2, I'll call them table stakes, to get into collegiate esports. I think one is exactly what you've asked, the arenas, right? You do have the right spaces for your competitive teams to play in and allow them to compete at the level that they need to compete at. I think the second piece is scholarships. Right now, that's the arms race in collegiate esports. We're I would love to tell you that the unique thing about our program is that that we have scholarships, but today that's, like I said, it's table stakes. If
Yeah.
you don't have scholarships, you're not going to be able to compete. Um, we are planning to announce shortly that what we believe to be the largest gift in the history of collegiate esports to help fund
Ooh.
some scholarships that we'll be offering. But that just gets you in the door. For us, I'll say 2 things that I think makes our program unique. Number one is the general academic rigor of what happens at this university. Like, Miami University, we're consistently ranked, a top 50 university in the country. We've been ranked. U.S. News and World Report said we're the #1 school in the country for undergraduate teaching. Like, if you want a top-notch undergraduate experience,
Yeah.
um, we think that's part of our unique value proposition. As much as everyone who plays collegiate esports wants to go pro, you and I both know the odds of that are slim, right? It's a narrow pool that you're competing to get into. And so anyone who's thinking about collegiate esports, if they were rational, needs to also be thinking about, what about the rest of my education? Like, what is the value of this degree? Um, the major that I'm the department chair of, the Department of Emerging Technology and Business and Design, our average starting salaries are higher than the business school.
Wow.
We got a 98% job placement rate, right? Students are, I think last year was pretty close to 60 grand that our students are making. And so, what we don't want to be is an esport churn where, people come here, they play collegiate esports, they leave after a year or leave after 2 years
Sure.
or leave after 4 years with the degree that's got no market value. So I think that's the first piece of it. The second piece of what I think we uniquely offer is we have built an academic program around the business of esports. That if you were to ask me where I think the marketplace for college graduates who are interested in esports, it's not in the competition side, right? A team's only 5 players, 6 players. Everybody else in this ecosystem are supporting that. It's the business of esports. It's understanding coaching and event management and marketing, right? All of these pieces that underlie it, sponsorship,
Yeah.
media rights. And so our approach, what we think is truly our unique feature, is that we've got an undergraduate certificate in esports management, which is a 6-course sequence in the business of esports. It's all taught online, and it all will be taught starting this fall on Twitch. So it'll be a Twitch delivered online degree or certificate open to anyone, whether they're a student here or not, to understand esports management. And the courses are team taught by people who are from industry. So it's our professors plus people from professional teams and from Twitch and from game publishers, right? I think that's our unique pitch. We also have a master's program in esports management, which is related to that, but it's the academic piece, I guess, is the very short version of a long answer I'm giving here, which we think that's what we've got to deliver, is the business side of esports.
Yeah. Well, I think that's amazing, especially given that so many schools that are rolling out programs today are less academically, qualified or offer a less strong academic profile to their students. So that's something that is a huge differentiator. Cool. So, I mean, really, the last question I have is, for those folks who are out there who are looking at programs and who are kind of browsing through and checking out the Miami program, what would you tell them? What's a piece of advice? What's something you want them to know?
Yeah, I guess two things. So first, picking a university is about a culture fit at the end of the day. I mean, look, we all teach the same thing. It's not like English 111 at my university is really different than English 111 at Harvard or Stanford or Michigan or Utah or UC Irvine, right? Like universities, the things we say are the same. What makes a university unique is the culture of the place. It's the people, it's the students, it's what life is like at those universities, and they're all really different. I don't think there's a better or worse one. That the ideal thing you want to find is one that fits you, right? If it makes sense for you to be at an NYU in the city, that's your jam,
Yeah.
then that's where you need to be. All right. And so I think it's important to get your hands around not even the what they're teaching, but what is the culture of that space. And I think the second piece of advice I would give is that as much as esports is growing at leaps and bounds, I think I read recently like the jobs in esports have doubled in the last year, but doubling can be going from 2 to 4, right? Like
Right.
it's still a small industry, and and pick an institution that's going to help you develop a set of, I sometimes refer to these as game adjacent skills, right? Skills that are relevant to the esports world, but are also relevant to all kinds of other worlds. That you're going there not to just learn how to play esports, right? Truth is, if you really want to know how to be great at esports, I don't think you need to go to college, right? A lot of great players peak in high school or soon after that. There's no reason to go to college to become a great player. You're going to want to go to college to expand the set of opportunities that are in front of you. And so you should choose your college to have not just the most expansive set of opportunities, but ones that are pointed in the direction that you want to face. And so picking your schools that way matters. All the other stuff, which I suspect that you've already thought about, and the people you talk to have already thought about. Yeah, you should find a place that genuinely believes in esports. I'd avoid places that say they won't play shooters because that's insane. I think I would find places that seem like they believe in it, right? Because you don't want to have to spend your whole college career trying to convince someone that this is a thing. Like we're past that at this point. Um, but that's again to my point earlier. Those are table stakes. All the best schools are going to have that already, and so looking for that fit, looking for your future. I think those are the places to pay attention to. Not even the esport program itself.
Yeah. Great. Thanks. Well, I guess, finally, is there any place that you'd recommend folks go to learn more about the program besides the webpage, Twitch, Discord, etc.?
No, just come to our webpage.
Okay.
Back to my theme about the Wild West. Like,
Yeah.
there will be a point at some point in the near future where there will be a single point to learn about these things. Right now, the esports space is horribly fragmented, and lots of very competing voices looking to sort of grab attention, and that makes it's unfortunate, right? Because there's not a single place to look, and I think ultimately there will be. I have no doubt in time that'll settle down, but for now, I think the bulk of the responsibility is on you, the student, right? You're gonna have. There's not a Princeton review that you're gonna go look at the top 10 programs. I mean, there are so many lists of the top programs in esports. I don't know how much stock to place in any of those lists. So there's a pretty significant responsibility on you as a prospective student to kind of do your homework about this.
Great. All right, Glenn. Well, thanks for taking the time. I really appreciate it.
It was good to see you again. I appreciate you reaching out, and I'll just say if anyone who is seeing this at some point wants to know more, please get in touch with me or one of our coaches. We'd be happy to host you. We'd happy to have you come out and check out our arenas and see what esports looks like at Miami University.